A TV show's ending is one of the most important parts of the entire experience. In a lot of ways, it defines everything that came before it. Just like an opening scene sets the tone, the ending is what you leave with, and it's the final impression that sticks. And when it works, it can make a good show feel unforgettable, but when it doesn't, it can start to unravel everything. Because an ending isn't just about finishing the story, it's about the payoff. It's about whether the time you spent watching actually leads to something satisfying. Do the characters get the conclusions they deserve? Do the big moments hit the way they're supposed to? Or does it leave you wondering why it didn't go further? Or worse, why it went the way it did? These are two shows I've genuinely loved for years, but when it came to their final seasons, something just felt off. So in this video, I'm going to break down how it happened, where things fell apart, and how two of the biggest shows ended up fumbling the most important part, the ending. The first major issue with these final seasons is that they're forced to wrap up so many plot lines in such a short amount of time. Stranger Things is a lot less worse than The Boys when it comes to this kind of thing, but it's still a problem. They introduce stuff like the Abyss in the final season, which to me feels tacked on and way too late in the show's history to be answering these kinds of questions. Stranger Things also has the iconic issue this season where they have to include so many characters, which is why there's just so much going on, and the final season ends up feeling overstuffed and super crowded with characters they now have to wrap up. Like I said, The Boys handles this way worse. They have to wrap up storylines for Homelander, Butcher, The Deep, newer characters from Gen V, and so many more. It feels like they're rushing through so many storylines and character arcs just to fit everything into this final season, while also trying to set up new storylines, which I'll get into later. These two shows, in their final seasons, just don't do a great job of wrapping things up in a polished and satisfying way. Whether it's having too many things resolved by the end, or just having too much going on in general, it ends up feeling messy, where some moments waste our time, and others just don't get the satisfying conclusions that they deserve. The second issue with these seasons is their questionable writing decisions. Stranger Things is definitely worse with this, because the season has some of the dumbest moments I think I've ever seen. And honestly, there are way too many dumb moments I could include in this video, but I'll just stick to some of the ones that genuinely make me mad. The first is Vecna just straight up forgetting some of his powers. There are multiple moments where he's basically taking a casual stroll instead of using his telekinesis to grab Holly or Max. On top of that, plot armor is a huge problem. If you're a named or main character, the Demogorgon will just scream in your face, but if you're some random person, you're getting ripped apart instantly. It generally doesn't make sense how Joyce Byers can fend off a Demogorgon long enough for Steve to conveniently hit it with his car. Between the plot armor and the constant coincidences this season, a lot of it feels forced. And there are other inconsistencies too, like Will Byers only being affected by the hive mind when the plot demands him to be. For The Boys, this issue is a little different. It just ends up wasting your time. We go through multiple different ways to kill Homelander this season, and a lot of them just lead to nowhere. The whole soup-killing virus is a major focus in the first half, and then suddenly it shifts to depowering him with Soldier Boy's blast, which becomes the real solution. So the earlier stuff just ends up feeling like filler. Then there's the Flight 37 video, which was built up as one of the most important pieces of evidence in the entire show. It should completely derail Homelander and turn the public against him. But instead of having real consequences, it just gets brushed aside with a satire joke about AI controlling the media. And while that idea is clever, it ends up making something that should have been huge feel completely insignificant. And overall, the writing in both of these final seasons just feels significantly weaker than what came before. Whether it's wasting our time on plot lines that go nowhere, or making so many questionable decisions that things start to feel unnatural, it all adds up. At a certain point, it stops feeling like intentional storytelling and starts feeling sloppy. And yes, fictional media always requires some level of suspension of disbelief, but there is a limit, and both of these shows manage to push way past it. The third reason that these finales aren't as great is that, although it's less noticeable, the shows just don't feel the same anymore. These shows went from having identity and character to now just feeling kind of generic. Stranger Things used to have this amazing vibe and tone as a creepy, eerie horror show, and the overall atmosphere was a huge part of what made it so special. But now, in the latest season, it feels more like a huge budget sci-fi Marvel movie. I know you've probably seen this image 1,000 times, but it truly shows the difference. The show went from feeling unique and having its own style to just feeling like every other Netflix show, where it has to raise the stakes, look bigger, and honestly just feels more dull because of it. The Boys does a better job at keeping its identity, since its whole thing has always been making fun of superhero shows and being one big satire. But the problem is, it just doesn't feel the same anymore because it started to become the exact thing that it used to make fun of. It used to joke about how every big superhero project needed a connected universe or a bunch of spin-offs, but now look at it. The final season spends a lot of its time using Soldier Boy to set up Vought Rising. It went from making fun of this kind of thing to actually doing it, and I don't mind optional spin-offs where you can watch more if you want more, but for The Boys specifically, spending a big chunk of your final season promoting that and setting up stuff feels off. It feels like a huge hit to the show, and honestly a big step away from what made it stand out in the first place. The next issue with these final seasons is Anticlimactic Payoffs. I'll talk about this more in the next section, but I just want to highlight some of the things that felt like they didn't hit the way I expected them to. The first one is how the big villains in these shows just didn't really deliver. Stranger Things builds Vecna up as the ultimate threat, but to me, and even with how the Duffer Brothers described this final season, it felt like they needed a big bad to end the show, and he didn't feel planned all the way through. And for the Boys, Homelander is supposed to be reaching his peak here. I was expecting a full-on apocalypse-type season for both of these shows, but especially with The Boys, I expected Homelander completely snap, like lasering crowds and going full chaos mode, instead of just trying to position himself as a god figure, which was also an interesting choice. So in both shows, the villains were hyped up for years, but they just didn't evolve enough to feel as threatening as they should have in this final season. There are also smaller things, like character arcs that go nowhere, Butcher's whole motivation of wanting to kill Soups just keep repeating without really progressing, and the Deep is still just the Deep, a joke character who never really changes.
How the f am I funny? What the f is so funny about me? Tell me what's funny.
And even in Stranger Things, stuff like Will coming out scene, something that's already been talked about a lot, just feels weirdly timed. You're about to go into a potentially world-ending fight, and now is the time when this moment happens? It just feels out of place and really forced. Then you've got things like Flight 37, like I mentioned earlier, not having nearly the impact it should have had, or new ideas being introduced that just go nowhere. In general, a lot of these setups in these final seasons feel undercut, either because there's too much going on or because the payoff just isn't strong enough, and it ends up making these moments feel way smaller than they should. The final major issue I have with these final seasons is their underwhelming finales. Before I really get into criticizing them, I don't think they're the worst finales ever made. On their own, they're honestly pretty decent. But when you look at them in the context of the full season and everything that was built up, they end up feeling really underwhelming. Let's start with the most egregious example, which is the Stranger Things finale. This finale is so devoid of logic that it genuinely sometimes hurts to watch. And there are countless moments where things just straight up feel dumb. The funniest one to me is how these teenagers and young adults somehow defeat a giant Final Form Mind Flayer in about 5 minutes. This is a battle that's been built up for almost 10 years and it's over in no time. And somehow, they walk out with barely a scratch. I also never once felt like any of the main characters were in danger. And of course, the only real death is Callie, a side character, because this show just refuses to kill off its main characters. On top of that, they don't even have a real plan going into the Abyss. They just kind of wander around, talk for a bit, and conveniently stumble into Vecna's lair in this massive new dimension. It's all just way coincidental, especially for a final season that is already built on coincidences. But even with all that, I'll give it some credit. Eleven's death was fitting since she's the main character and it would carry the most weight. I do think not fully committing to it feels weak and kind of shows the struggle in the writing this season, but if she actually is dead like I think, it works. That said, it raises even more questions, like if Will has powers too, why wouldn't they just go after him next? But honestly, at that point, the logic is already so broken that it barely matters. I do think the individual character endings were solid and the epilogue felt right. Vecna's death was handled well and Joyce being the one to finish him off was fitting. And honestly, if you just turn your brain off, this finale can be pretty enjoyable, but most of the time, it doesn't make any sense. Similarly, I think The Boys had an okay finale, but it just wasn't incredible. A big reason it didn't live up to the expectations is because the expectations Amazon set themselves with the promotional posters. We had these insane images of Homelander looking over a burning Earth and Butcher standing inside a destroyed Vought tower, and that sets a very clear tone for how this season is supposed to go, but it's just not how it ends. Instead of Homelander actually going out and scorching the Earth, we see him threatening people like he's done for the past few seasons. And it's honestly crazy to think that Black Noir of all people ends up doing more damage this season and technically has more kills than Homelander. In the same way, the Oval Office fight was super disappointing. The fight itself lasts about 5 minutes, and for a threat as big as Homelander, it feels way too short. I was expecting full-on death and destruction for at least 10 minutes, especially based on the marketing. Instead, we get Homelander struggling to even fly out of the office when earlier in the show he could zip up to space and back in seconds. I mean, we literally see Homelander keep up with A-Train. It just doesn't make any sense, and it's honestly confusing how much they nerfed him for this fight. The fight with the Deep was okay too. Starlight being the one to confront him makes sense, and it works as a satisfying end to his character arc. I do think it's a little weird that she brings him to a beach of all places where he is the strongest, but whatever. His death itself was fitting, even if the logic behind it was a little shaky. And honestly, if you look at this finale on its own, it's not that bad. The final conversation between Butcher and Huey was really well done, and I actually laughed when Ashley got impeached. But when you look at it in the context of the entire show, it feels like this could have happened in season 3. But in the end, they ended up stretching the show to 5 seasons and having an underwhelming finale. And that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. If you did, what'd you guys think of these series finales? Like I said, I love these shows. Like I said, I think the finales themselves in their own right were good, but it lacked so many things for a final season, and in general, just felt really underwhelming. Like I said, thank you all so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video. Once again, comment your thoughts on these final seasons and what you thought of them. Thank you all for watching. Have an amazing day.